He loved the outdoors and nature so much that every morning he biked to work as the sun began to rise over the mountains surrounding the city.
Hi, I'm headed to work and someone got hit on a bicycle.
Yeah, I knew they were hurt, but I didn't know they were hurt that bad.
What would make someone keep a video of a murder for a year, then post it to social media? Scott Habermel, a 56-year-old physicist and father, was killed by a stolen car on his morning bike ride in Albuquerque. The hit was deliberate. It was filmed. The people responsible laughed while he died, then saved it alongside dozens of other crimes. For a year, detectives searched while the perpetrators carried the evidence in their phones, showing friends. Then one posted it to Instagram. This story begins on an ordinary morning before sunrise over the Sandia Mountains. That morning, Scott was doing what he'd done 1,000 times before. Scott Habermel wheeled his bicycle out into the darkness at 4 in the morning. The Sandia Mountains were a black silhouette against the eastern sky, waiting for the sun. He had made this ride hundreds of times, more than 1,000. If you counted the years commuting from his home to Lockheed Martin on 2 wheels, while the rest of Albuquerque slept. Scott was 56, a physicist, a father of 2, a man who had spent 30 years building things that had never existed before: systems, solutions, technologies that required him to imagine what was possible and then make it real. He could have driven. Most mornings, he chose the bicycle. The reason was simple: the sunrise over the Sandias, the way the light turned the mountains pink, then gold, then white hot as the day began. He had watched that transformation so many times, he could time his commute to it. Leave at 4, reach the eastern stretch of Lomas Boulevard by 4:30. Arrive at work as the first light hit the lab's windows. This morning was no different. The air was cool, the streets empty, the city still dark. He clipped his helmet, checked the tires, adjusted the straps of his backpack. Routine made automatic by repetition. He swung his leg over the seat and began to pedal. The chain clicked softly in the silence. His breath came steady. The pavement rolled beneath him, familiar and predictable. He turned onto Lomas, heading east, toward the mountains and the light that would come. Scott Habermel had built a life the same way he built his inventions, with care, with consistency, with an understanding that small choices made daily compound into something larger. A marriage, a career, a morning commute that doubled as a kind of meditation. A daily reminder of why he lived where he lived, why he did the work he did. Remember the hour, 4 in the morning, in a city still asleep. Remember who was awake in it. Scott pedaled east. The sky above the mountains was beginning to pale, the first hint of what was coming. He had no reason to think this ride would be different from any other. He had no reason to look over his shoulder. He was alone on the road, or so he believed, doing what he had done 1,000 times before. He was wrong about being alone, 4 miles away, in a car that belonged to someone else. 4 boys had been awake all night. They were younger than anyone would believe. Too young to drive, too young to be out, too young to understand what they were about to do. But they had a stolen car, a phone with a camera, and 30 minutes left before the sun came up, and they had already decided what came next. Jonathan's hands were on the wheel when he shouldn't have had hands on any wheel. 12 years old, no license, someone else's car. Jonathan Overbay, already on probation for robbery and theft, had stolen the car hours earlier from a single mother he'd never met. He had told the others it was his. He was like, "Oh, it's my car. I got it so he didn't let anyone else drive," one of them would say later. Most of the night, Jonathan was driving. In the back seat. William Garcia sat with his phone raised, filming. He was 15. He had been recording for hours the streets, the dashboard, the others passing around a vape pen thick with THC smoke. Everything went into a folder on his phone. Stolen cars, guns, convenience stores they'd rolled past, debating whether to stop. Dozens of videos, all saved, all backed up, all ready to watch again. Beside him sat Elijah Engelking, also 15, picked up at some point during the night. The exact hour didn't matter. None of them were keeping track of time. In the front passenger seat was Messiah Hayes, 12 years old. He had been on the streets since he was 9, abandoned by parents who were not in the picture and would not be in the picture when the night ended. Later, investigators would find that detail almost as disturbing as what came next. A child raising himself in stolen cars with strangers. They were all armed. "I had a gun on him," one would say, describing a moment earlier in the night. And we all had our guns, whether that was posturing or reality. The guns were real enough. So was the car. So were the empty streets of Albuquerque at 4 in the morning, still dark, waiting for the sun. The camera wasn't evidence to them. It was the point. The night only mattered if there was something to watch later. They had been driving for hours with no destination, no plan, no adults who knew where they were or cared to ask. Jonathan kept his hands on the wheel. William kept his phone raised. The THC smoke hung in the air, sweet and chemical. The dashboard lights glowed green. Street lights passed overhead in rhythmic intervals, casting shadows that slid across their faces and disappeared. They were bored. That was the problem. Stealing the car had been exciting for the first hour. Driving it, less so. Smoking. Filming. Cruising empty streets. It was all starting to feel routine. The folder on William's phone was full of nights like this. Nights that looked the same, sounded the same, ended the same. Nothing happened, and they went home. But the folder had room. Room for one more video. Room for something different. Something they hadn't filmed yet. Something worth watching again. They didn't know yet what that would be. In a few minutes, they would. The folder already held dozens of videos, stolen cars, guns, convenience stores, all of it saved and backed up and ready to watch again. It had room for one more. A man on a bicycle appeared ahead in the bike lane, pedaling toward the mountains where the sun would rise. Jonathan saw him first. He slowed the car, then made a U-turn. The cyclist kept pedaling, unaware. His back was to them now. Headlights in a rear-view mirror at 4:30 in the morning meant nothing. Cars passed cyclists every day. From the back seat. Someone said it first. "Just bump him, bruh." Then again. Like a question looking for agreement. Like, just bump him. Yeah, just bump him. Go like 15, 20, 15 to 20 miles per hour. A nudge. A scare. Something to film and laugh about later. William raised his phone. "Are you guys recording this?" someone asked. Multiple phones came up, multiple cameras pointing forward through the windshield at the man on the bicycle who had no idea what was coming. Jonathan said, "I'm about to hit this N-word." He didn't slow to 15. He didn't slow to 20. "Jonathan speeds up instead of slows down," one of them would say later, recounting it as if he'd only been watching. "He's going like 35, 40. Then he hits him." Keep that speed in mind. 35 to 40 miles per hour. Not a bump. Not a nudge. Not an accident. The impact. The windshield cracked. The sound came through the car and the phones, and the laughter that erupted immediately after. All four of them were recording. All four of them were laughing. The man on the bicycle was no longer on the bicycle. He was on the pavement, motionless. And they were already turning the car around, driving away, filming through the rear window as the scene disappeared behind them. "You guys see what happens?" someone asked, checking the footage. "No, I got nothing," another answered. It didn't matter. Someone had captured it. The folder had its new video. Jonathan pulled the car onto a side street a few blocks away. He got out to inspect the damage. The windshield was cracked, spider-webbed from the center where the impact had struck. It was visible, obvious, the kind of thing a cop would notice if they got pulled over. "Bro, we can't be driving around in this car," Jonathan said. So they left it, walked away from the stolen car with the cracked windshield and the single mother's insurance information still in the glove box. They would steal another one later. Cars were easy. The video, though the video stayed, saved to the folder, backed up to the cloud, ready to watch again, to show to friends, to prove what they'd done. They had thrown away the car because a cracked windshield might get them caught. They kept the video because being seen had always been the point. 4 miles behind them, a man who had been on his way to work lay on Lomas Boulevard in the bike lane he had ridden 1,000 times before. The sun was beginning to rise over the Sandia Mountains, turning the sky pink the way it always did. He would not see it. The call came in at 4:32 in the morning from someone else on the way to work. The caller was heading east on Lomas Boulevard when headlights caught the twisted metal of a bicycle in the bike lane, and someone lying beside it. The voice on the 911 recording was calm, matter-of-fact, the tone of someone used to early mornings and long commutes. "Hi, I'm headed to work and someone got hit on a bicycle." The dispatcher asked about the condition. "Yeah, the bike is mangled, like it's pretty twisted up." What the caller didn't say, because how could anyone know yet, was that the car that did it was already gone. So was the driver. So were the passengers. So was the video of what had just happened, saved to a folder on a phone in a pocket miles away. Responding officers arrived within minutes. The scene was what it looked like, a hit and run. A man on the pavement, barely breathing. A bicycle that had been ridden for decades folded in half by the force of the impact. No skid marks. No debris from another vehicle. No witnesses. Just the empty bike lane and the sun beginning to rise over the mountains. They searched his belongings under the beam of a flashlight. Backpack. Helmet, still strapped. A wallet with an ID inside. That was how they learned his name. Not from him, he couldn't speak, but from a driver's license photograph and an address in Albuquerque. Scott Habermel, 56 years old. For a few minutes, he had been a man without a name on the side of a road. The first person to learn who he wasn't his family, but a stranger with a flashlight and a laminated card. Paramedics loaded him into an ambulance. He was still alive. Barely. The kind of alive that doesn't last. They rushed him to the hospital, sirens cutting through the early morning quiet, past streets where most people were still asleep, and 4 boys who weren't. He died a few hours later. By then, the car that hit him had been abandoned on a side street somewhere in Albuquerque. Windshield cracked. Interior still smelling of THC smoke. Registration belonging to a single mother who didn't know yet that her car had been used to kill someone. The 4 boys had already stolen another one. They thought they were safe. They thought ditching the car meant ditching the evidence. They were half right. The car was gone. The police would spend days trying to find it, canvassing neighborhoods, checking surveillance footage, following leads that went nowhere. But the video was still there, saved, backed up, ready to be watched again. It would stay hidden for a year in a folder no one thought to check, while investigators chased a vehicle that had already been abandoned and a driver whose age they couldn't have imagined. The investigation would begin with a mangled bicycle, a name, and nothing else. No witnesses, no vehicle, no suspects. Just a man who had left for work before dawn and never arrived, and a crime scene that offered no answers. He died a few hours later. By then, the car that hit him was already gone, and so was the car after that. They began with the camera's every doorbell, every security system in a 2-mile radius of where Scott Habermel had been found. The detectives started the methodical search for a vehicle that would never be found where they were looking. Not because it didn't exist, but because their assumptions about who had been driving it were perfectly reasonable and perfectly wrong. They knocked on doors, showed photographs of the scene, the mangled bicycle, the stretch of Lomas Boulevard where the hit had occurred, asked homeowners to check their footage. Doorbell cameras, security systems, dash cams from cars parked on the street. Anything pointed at the road between 4 and 5 in the morning on May 29th. They were looking for a sedan, maybe an SUV, something large enough to do that kind of damage. They were looking for a driver drunk, probably, or distracted. Someone who had panicked and fled. They were looking for a vehicle with a cracked windshield, because an impact like that would have left visible damage. The kind of damage that would need to be repaired. The kind of thing someone would bring to a body shop within days, maybe a week. Because driving around with a shattered windshield draws attention. They checked every repair shop in Albuquerque, called around, sent officers to ask questions. Had anyone brought in a car with front-end damage in the last week? Windshield replacement after a collision? Anything that looked like it had hit something or someone. Nothing. The footage from the cameras showed the usual early commuters, delivery trucks, the occasional dog walker, empty streets at 4 in the morning in a city still asleep. No speeding cars, no visible damage, no driver fleeing the scene. And here is what none of them knew. The car they were looking for had been abandoned an hour after the hit, ditched on a side street with the windshield still cracked, the registration still in the glove box, and no one inside. It would be found eventually. Days later, reported by the owner as stolen. By then, the connection to the hit and run was obvious, but the connection to the driver was not. Because the driver wasn't someone you'd think to look for. No repair shop would see the windshield. No body shop would log the damage. The car had been thrown away like the stolen property it was, replaced within hours by another vehicle taken from another driveway, driven by the same hands that had gripped the wheel the first time. They were searching for a man. Maybe mid-20s. Maybe older. Someone with a record. Maybe someone with a reason to run. Someone who had made a mistake and was now trying to cover it up. Badly. The way people do when panic sets in and logic doesn't. They were looking for a grown man with a broken windshield who would have to get it fixed somewhere. The windshield had been abandoned within the hour, and the boy who broke it was 11 years old. The only footage that existed wasn't on any camera in Albuquerque. It was on a phone in someone's pocket, saved to a folder, backed up to the cloud, and waiting. 1 week became 2. 2 became a month. And the file with Scott Habermel's name on it began to gather dust. It wasn't closed. The case remained open officially, technically, theoretically active. But there were no new leads. No vehicle had surfaced. No witnesses came forward. No repair shop had logged the kind of damage they were looking for. The case sat on a desk with dozens of others, waiting for something to break. And nothing did. Meanwhile, 4 miles across the city, 4 boys kept doing what they had been doing the night they killed him. Stealing cars, showing off guns, robbing convenience stores, filming all of it. The folder on their phones grew thicker. More videos, more crimes, more proof of the pattern that had started long before Scott Habermel and continued long after. The murder video was still there, still backed up, still saved. They watched it sometimes. The way people rewatch footage of a concert or a vacation. Something to remember. Something to show friends who hadn't been there. Evidence. Yes, but not to them. To them, it was a trophy. They had not been caught. Not for the hit and run, not for the car thefts, not for anything. The system had touched them before. Jonathan was already on probation when he killed Scott. But the system had let go. It always did. They were juveniles, and juveniles got second chances, third chances, as many chances as it took until they aged out or got serious. This was serious. A man was dead, but no one knew who had done it. So it didn't count yet. The file stayed open. No one closed it. No one opened it anymore either. Summer turned to fall. Fall turned to winter. The Sandia Mountains turned pink at dawn, the way they always did. And commuters kept riding their bikes to work on Lomas Boulevard. And the sun kept rising over a city that had already forgotten the man who used to ride that route every morning. His name was in the news for a week, maybe 2. Then it wasn't. But the video never went away. It stayed in the folder, time-stamped May 29th, 2024, at 4:30 in the morning. A few minutes of shaky footage showing exactly what had happened and exactly who had done it. The only evidence that could solve the case existed in perfect clarity, backed up to the cloud, ready to be found. It just hadn't been found yet. 1 year. 12 months of investigation that led nowhere because the assumptions were reasonable and the evidence was invisible. 12 months of the 4 boys walking free, stealing more cars, filming more crimes, adding more videos to the folder that already held the answer. And then Messiah Hayes, 12 years old now, decided people should see it. It stayed in the folder for a year, backed up. Saved. Watched again by the boys who made it. One upload would undo 12 months of silence. He tapped share. Messiah Hayes. 1 year after the murder. Scrolled through the folder on his phone and found the video from May 29th. The one from the stolen car. The one with the man on the bicycle. The one they had all watched a dozen times. Laughing at the parts that sounded the best. The acceleration. The impact. The celebration after. He selected it. Uploaded it to his Instagram account. No caption. No explanation. Just the video and the timestamp from a year ago. And then it was out there for anyone to see. He didn't think about the police. He thought about the views. Within hours, the video had left Albuquerque. Someone shared it. Someone else shared that. It moved through Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, spreading the way videos do when they're shocking enough to make people stop scrolling. A hit and run filmed from inside the car. Audio of boys planning it. Laughter after a man was struck and left to die on the road. People who watched it didn't know the victim's name yet. They didn't know the city, the date, or whether anyone had been caught. They just knew what they were watching. A murder filmed and celebrated by the people who did it. Someone recognized the landmarks. Someone else recognized the case, the unsolved hit and run from a year ago in Albuquerque. Someone sent the link to the police. 12 months of investigation. 1 upload. The detectives who had spent a year searching for a vehicle, a driver, a witness, anything, now had everything. The video showed the interior of the car, the dashboard, the road ahead. It captured the voices. Just bump him. Bruh. Like, just bump him. Yeah, just bump him. Go like 15, 20. Then the engine sound changing as Jonathan accelerated instead 35, 40 miles per hour. Then the impact. Then the laughter. It wasn't just evidence. It was proof of intent. The hardest element of any hit-and-run case, showing it wasn't an accident, that the driver meant to do it, was there in audio, timestamped and backed up by the video itself. They had planned it. They had done it deliberately. They had laughed about it after, and they had filmed it all. The video showed faces in the rearview mirror, reflections in the windows, enough to start building a list. Social media made the rest easy. Messiah's account was public. His followers were local. His tagged photos showed the others. Jonathan, William, Elijah. The metadata on the video gave them a timestamp. Cross-referenced with the 911 call, it matched perfectly. Within days, they had all 4 names, their ages, their addresses, their probation records, because 3 of them already had files in the system for theft, robbery, weapons charges, kids who had been touched by the law before and released, kids who had kept stealing, kept filming, kept escalating. Within hours, the video had left Albuquerque. Within days, the police had all 4 names, their ages, their addresses, everything, including the name of the boy who posted it. The oldest was 15. The detectives pulled the birth dates from the juvenile records, cross-referenced them with the social media profiles, and built the list in an afternoon. 4 names, 4 faces, 4 ages that made a year of failed investigation suddenly make sense. Jonathan Overbay, 12 years old now, 11 when he killed Scott Habermel, already on probation for robbery and theft when he stole the car that morning, already in the system, already given chances, already being watched, just not closely enough. Messiah Hayes, 12 years old, on the streets since he was 9, no parents in the picture, no one to call when the police came looking. He was the one who posted the video, the one who thought people should see it, the one who handed the case to the police on a screen. William Garcia, 15, the one in the back seat with the phone raised, filming everything. His folder held the videos. His account had been sharing clips for months, stolen cars, guns, vandalism. Not the murder, though. That one Messiah posted. But William had kept it, backed it up, watched it again. Elijah Engelking, 15, picked up sometime during the night. Along for the ride. In the car when it happened, his voice on the audio, just bump him. None of them were old enough to have a driver's license. That was why the car had been stolen. That was why there was no registration trail. No repair shop visit. No adult making the kind of mistakes adults make when they panic. The investigation had been searching for someone who didn't exist. A driver with a broken windshield who would need to get it fixed, who would leave a paper trail, who would behave the way a rational adult would behave after killing someone. But Jonathan Overbay was 11 years old when he hit Scott Habermel at 35 to 40 miles per hour. He didn't need the windshield fixed. He needed a new car. So he stole one. None of them could legally drive. So of course they stole the car. The logic was flawless, in its own way. If you can't rent a car, steal one. If you can't register it, abandon it. If you can't get insurance, why worry about damage? The rules didn't apply because the rules were written for people old enough to follow them. These four had been operating outside the system long enough to know it couldn't catch what it wasn't looking for. Until Messiah posted the video, the arrests would come next. Quickly, methodically. Each one pulled from wherever they were and brought in with parents or guardians because of their ages. The law required it. No interrogation without an adult present. No charges filed without going through the juvenile system first. No trial without considering their age, their circumstances, their potential for rehabilitation. Because of their ages, the police could not question any of them alone. Their parents would have to come too. And that is where this stops being a story about four children. The phones came first, seized from all four boys, before the arrests were even finalized. Standard procedure for juveniles charged with a felony: take the devices, extract the data, build the case before the lawyers get involved and everything slows down. The detectives handed them to the tech unit and waited. The extraction took hours. 4 phones, 4 cloud accounts, 4 folders full of files, photos, messages, videos, lots of videos. The tech pulled everything and loaded it onto a shared drive where investigators could sort through what mattered and what didn't. What mattered was the folder, the one Messiah had posted from, the one William had been backing up for months, the one that held the video of Scott Habermel being hit and killed on Lomas Boulevard at 4:30 in the morning. But when the file tree opened, that wasn't the only video in the folder. There were dozens. Before we show you what else was in that folder, are you still here? Comment A if you think this was their first serious crime. Or B if you think the murder was just one of many, and tell us in one sentence why you picked that. Please note, what follows contains some recreated details for narrative purposes. The lesson is what matters. Stolen cars. Dates and timestamps stretching back months. Video after video of the 4 of them. Sometimes just 2, sometimes 3, inside vehicles that didn't belong to them. Driving through Albuquerque at night, filming themselves, laughing, passing around vape pens and guns. Guns, close-ups of pistols, poses with weapons pointed at the camera, at each other, out the window at nothing, casual, routine, entertainment, convenience stores, footage from inside cars parked outside, debating whether to go in, whether it was worth it. Some videos ended with them driving away. Others cut off mid-laugh. Robberies. Petty theft captured on shaky phone cameras. Faces visible. Voices clear. No attempt to hide who they were or what they were doing. Why would they? The videos weren't evidence, they were content. The murder of Scott Habermel was not special to them. It was just one more. One of the boys would say it later, during questioning. I shared it like a year later. It was in a folder with a bunch of other videos with us driving in cars. As if that explained it. As if filing a murder next to a joyride made it less of a murder. The folder told the story the investigation had missed. This wasn't 4 kids who made one terrible mistake. This was a pattern. Steal a car, film it. Show a gun, film it. Hit a man on a bicycle and leave him to die. Film it. Save it all. Back it up. Watch it again. The murder of Scott Habermel was filed in the same folder as the convenience store they had hit 12 days earlier. The guns they posed with. The cars they stole before and after. Then they brought Jonathan in. Jonathan Overbay had been in rooms like this before. The metal table. The fluorescent lights. the one-way mirror on the wall that wasn't fooling anyone. He sat in the chair with his hands folded, waiting. His mother sat beside him, pregnant with her 5th child, her hand resting on her belly. She had already spoken with a guard outside. She knew someone had been hurt. Somebody got hurt really bad and died, the guard had told her. She didn't know yet that her son had killed him. The interviewer conducting the interrogation had seen plenty of juveniles in this room, plenty of kids who thought they were adults, plenty of parents who didn't know what their children were capable of. But 12 was young, even for a city with Albuquerque's problems. 12 was supposed to be middle school, homework, video games. Not this. The door closed. The recording started. The interviewer sat down across from Jonathan and his mother and began with the script that had to be followed. The warnings that had to be given before any question could be asked. Miranda rights. The right to remain silent. The right to an attorney. Anything said could be used against him in court. Standard procedure. Required by law. Especially for a juvenile. The words filled the room in the flat, professional tone of someone who had said them 100 times before. Jonathan's mother leaned close to her son and said something the recording didn't pick up clearly, but the meaning was obvious. Don't talk. Wait for a lawyer. Don't say anything they can use. Jonathan understood. He had been through this before, not for murder, but for robbery, for theft, for the kind of crimes that got him probation and supervision, and second chances that didn't teach him to stop. He knew how this worked. He knew what silence could protect and what words could destroy. He was 12 years old, and he already knew the script. The warnings, the questions, the waiting, the silence. So when the interviewer asked if he understood his rights, Jonathan said yes. And when the interviewer asked if he was willing to talk about what happened, Jonathan invoked his right to an attorney. Clean, simple, practiced. The kind of answer that ends interrogations before they start. His mother nodded, her hand still on her belly. She had done what a mother does, protected her child. She didn't know yet what he had done. She didn't know about the car. The bicycle. The man who had been pedaling toward work at 4:30 in the morning and never arrived. She didn't know about the video, the laughter, the folder full of evidence that her son had been carrying in his pocket for a year. She just knew he needed a lawyer. The interviewer sat back. The silence filled the room, not uncomfortable for Jonathan, who had learned that silence was safer than words, but deliberate for the investigator, who was deciding what came next. He would not talk. So the detective decided to let him watch instead. The interviewer rotated the laptop toward them. The screen was paused on a frozen frame asphalt, a glimpse of handlebars, the edge of a shoulder in morning light. She explained the connection was poor, so she was downloading the file first. She's downloading it so that it doesn't have to rely on a bad connection. The progress bar crept across the screen. The laptop fan hummed. "I don't want to see that," his mother said, but she didn't look away. She sat there, hand on her belly where her 5th child was growing, eyes on the screen. Jonathan didn't move, hands folded, silent. He had invoked his right to a lawyer, and the interviewer couldn't ask questions. But she could show him what he had kept for a year. The download finished. The interviewer said, "Here we go," and pressed play. The video began. Shaky footage from inside a car. The phone pointed through the windshield. Laughter in the background. Voices muffled. The view bounced as the car moved. Streetlights. Empty road. Then, in the distance, a figure on a bicycle. The interviewer didn't watch the screen. She had already seen it. She watched them instead, their faces lit by the laptop glow. She was looking for the moment it landed. The recognition. The horror. His mother's hand pressed against her belly. Jonathan's expression didn't change. The sound came through the laptop speakers first. A thud, mechanical and organic at once. The noise of metal and force meeting something softer. Then, immediately, the laughter. Screaming, howling laughter from boys' voices, high and delighted and completely unaware of what they had just... "Oh my gosh," his mother said. The video kept playing. The car didn't stop. Shaky footage of the road passing. Someone whooping. Voices celebrating. The bicycle was gone. So was the man who had been riding it, Scott Habermel, 56 years old, a father of 2. Third years building systems at Lockheed Martin. He was no longer in the frame. He was on the pavement behind them, and they were laughing. The video ended. The screen went black. The interviewer closed the laptop halfway. Jonathan stared at the edge where the screen met the base, hands still folded, face blank. For 1 year, that video had lived in a folder on his phone. He had watched it, shown it to friends, never deleted it. Not after the hit. Not after the news reports. Not after Scott's widow buried him. He kept it, backed it up, carried it. And when Messiah posted it to Instagram a year later, Jonathan didn't ask him to take it down. When it ended, his mother asked a question. It was not about the man on the bicycle. The first thing she asked was whether he wanted enchiladas when they got home. Not about the man on the bicycle. Not about what had just happened. Not about the video she had just watched. The one where her son laughed while someone died. She asked about dinner. She talked about what was in the fridge. What she could make. Whether she had all the ingredients or if she'd need to stop somewhere on the way back. Her voice was calm, steady, the tone of a mother planning an ordinary evening after an ordinary day. The interviewer sat across from them, silent, watching. Jonathan said nothing. He had invoked his right to a lawyer, and he wasn't going to break that silence now. He sat with his hands folded, his face blank, while his mother talked about food. She shifted in her chair, one hand moving to her belly. She was tired, she said, carrying her 5th child. She needed to rest when they got back. They both did. This had been a long day, longer than either of them expected, and she wanted to get him home. Fed. Settled. She told him she loved him, that they would get through this, that everything would be okay. Her voice was soft, reassuring. The voice of a mother comforting a child who had scraped a knee or failed a test. Not a child who had killed a man and filmed it for fun. She did not say his name. Not once. The interviewer had heard enough. She had sat through interrogations before, watched parents defend their children in ways that defied logic and morality. But this was something else. Jonathan's mother had just watched her 12-year-old son accelerate a stolen car into a man on a bicycle at 35 to 40 miles per hour. She had heard the laughter. She had seen the celebration. And her response was meal planning. No question about Scott Habermel. No acknowledgement of his family, his widow, the 2 children who would grow up without a father. No horror at what her son had done. No remorse. No reckoning. Just enchiladas and reassurance and talk of going home. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. A woman who had just witnessed proof of her child's capacity for cruelty, responding as if the problem were logistical rather than moral, as if the question were what to make for dinner, not how to reconcile the boy she raised with the boy who had laughed at a man's death. The session ended. Jonathan and his mother left. The interviewer sat alone in the interrogation room. The laptop closed. The silence heavy. Across the city, in another interrogation room, another set of parents had just finished watching the same video with their son. Their explanation was different. It wasn't his fault, they said. William Garcia's parents had come immediately. They sat on either side of him in the interrogation room. His mother on one chair, his father on the other. William between them. They had watched the video. All of it. The planning, the hit, the laughter. And now they had an explanation. It wasn't his fault. The city was to blame, they said. The car should never have been accessible. It had been stolen from a driveway. Keys left inside. An invitation to kids who didn't know any better. Their son had been influenced by the other's older boys. Bad kids. The kind of crowd a parent couldn't control. William had made mistakes. Yes. But this wasn't something he would have done on his own. The interviewer listened, took notes, said nothing. It was a familiar script. Deflect responsibility. Blame external factors. Protect the child at all costs, even when the cost was a man's life. In another room down the hall, Messiah Hayes sat alone. He was 12 years old, the youngest of the four. The one who had posted the video to Instagram a year after the murder. The one who had been on the streets since he was 9 because no parent wanted him there. An officer had tried calling every contact in the file, his mother, his grandmother, every number that might connect to someone who could come get him. Sign the forms. Take responsibility. No one answered. No one came. Protocol was clear. A juvenile could not be transported to detention without guardian consent. The law required an adult to sign off, to acknowledge where the child was going and why. Without that signature, the police couldn't move him. They could arrest him, charge him, question him, but they couldn't take him anywhere. He was 12 years old. So they brought in an electric pump and an air mattress and inflated it on the floor of the interrogation room. The hiss of air filling vinyl. The awkward bulk of it taking shape in a space designed for confessions. Not sleep. An officer found a blanket somewhere. A pillow. The basics. Messiah Hayes, who had filmed a man being killed for fun and laughed while Scott Habermel died on the road, would sleep on a borrowed air mattress in a police station because no adult in his life would sign a form. The system had failed him long before he killed someone. It was still failing him now. The lights stayed on. The door stayed locked. The air mattress sat in the middle of the institutional floor like evidence of something no one wanted to name a child so thoroughly. Abandoned that even his arrest couldn't summon a guardian. William went home that night with his parents. Messiah stayed. A year later, William Garcia sat down with his lawyer to tell the rest of the story. What happened in the car before the U-turn? Who said what? And why they went back. William said he tried to stop them. That was his version. The one he gave with his lawyer sitting beside him during the plea deal confession. Legal counsel present. Testimony offered in exchange for consideration. He was in the back seat, William said. He told them not to turn around. He didn't want to do it. The others made the decision. He was just there. The interviewer took notes, watched, said little. The story William told was careful, calculated, designed to minimize his role while still providing the information the prosecutor needed. He positioned himself as the reluctant participant, the one who had objected but been overruled, the one who had filmed but not driven, who had watched but not wanted. It was self-preservation dressed up as cooperation, and it was enough for a deal. The sentences came down in pieces, scattered across months, as the juvenile justice system processed 4 boys who had committed an adult crime. Jonathan Overbay would be detained in a juvenile facility until he turned 21. The driver, the one who had accelerated to 35, 40 miles per hour, when the others said to bump. The one who had laughed the loudest on the video. He would serve his time and walk out. Elijah Martinez took a plea deal. The details were sealed because he was a juvenile. His record would follow him only as far as the law allowed, which wasn't far. William Garcia awaited sentencing. Likely house arrest. Likely probation. Likely consequences that would feel temporary because they were. Messiah Hayes, who had posted the video to Instagram a year after the murder, who had spent the night of his arrest on an air mattress because no one came to get him, awaited his outcome. What is 9 years measured against a life? Jonathan was 11 years old when he killed Scott Habermel. He would be released at 21. 9 years in a juvenile facility for a man who had lived 56 years and would never reach 63. 9 years of supervision, structure, second chances, then freedom. Scott Habermel had spent 30 years building things at Lockheed Martin. Systems, technologies, solutions to problems that required him to imagine possibilities and then make them real. The 4 boys had spent 30 minutes in a stolen car. 1 act, 1 video, 1 man dead. Scott's widow would spend the rest of her life without him. His children would grow up and grow old without their father. The years he should have had, the grandchildren he should have met, the sunrises he should have watched over the Sandia Mountains were gone. Jonathan would be free before his 30th birthday. The math didn't balance. It couldn't. There was no equation that made 9 years equal to a lifetime. No sentence that restored what had been taken. No justice that brought Scott back to his bike, his commute, his ordinary morning that had ended in a hit-and-run filmed for fun. Jonathan was 11 when he killed Scott Habermel. Free at 21. 9 years for 63. The Sandia Mountains turned pink at dawn, the way they did the morning Scott Habermel left for his last ride. The sun still rises over Albuquerque. The light still hits the eastern peaks, turning them gold, then white. The bike lane on Lomas Boulevard still carries commuters to work. The world continued turning after Scott stopped. The mountains don't remember. The city doesn't stop. Life moves forward, whether or not a man who rode a bicycle every morning for 30 years.
Scott Habermel was 63 years old, a dedicated father of 2, an outdoorsman, an inventor, and an all-around phenomenal person.
Scott had spent 3 decades building things at Lockheed Martin, systems that hadn't existed before he imagined them, technologies that required him to see possibilities and then make them real. He was a creator, a builder, a man who understood that making something required patience, skill, time. 4 boys spent 30 minutes in a stolen car destroying what they didn't understand. They didn't build, they consumed. They took what belonged to someone else and used it for entertainment. A car, a video, a life.
Just bump in, bruh.
1 man created for 30 years. 4 children destroyed in half an hour. The questions that remain don't have satisfying answers. Why did Messiah tell them to turn around? What made an 11-year-old think that was something to go back for? Something to film. Something to celebrate. Did they understand what they were doing? Did they think hitting a man on a bicycle would be like hitting a mailbox, a trash can, something that didn't bleed? Do they understand now what they took, or only what they lost? Jonathan will walk out of detention at 21. Elijah's records are sealed. William testified for a deal. Messiah, who posted the video that solved the case, awaits his sentence. They will all be free, eventually. They will all have lives that continue past their teenage years, past their 20s, into the decades. Scott will never see. They took a father, a husband, a man who loved sunrises enough to wake at 4 in the morning just to watch them. They took 30 years of knowledge, experience, memory. They took someone who mattered to people who will spend the rest of their lives with a hole where he used to be. And what did they keep? They ditched the stolen car to hide the damage, abandoned it on a side street because a cracked windshield might get them caught. They walked away from the evidence of the crime because they understood, on some level, that being found with it was dangerous. But they kept the video. For a year. It sat in a folder on their phones. They watched it. They showed it to friends.
So you guys see what happens? No.
They laughed at it again. And when enough time had passed, Messiah posted it to Instagram for the world to see. They threw away evidence of the crime. They displayed proof of the murder. Being seen was the point. Scott Habermel's story didn't end with justice. It ended with a father gone and a system exposed. Scott was 41. He was a father and engineer who built systems that worked. He left for work on a September morning in 2021 and never came home. His death wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Captured on video, laughed at, and hidden for a year. The 4 boys who killed him will walk free while Scott's children grow up without their father. That imbalance is the reality of juvenile justice when age becomes excuse. This case reveals something uncomfortable. Our system wasn't built for children who commit adult crimes with adult consequences. Jonathan was 11. He's detained until 21. 9 years for a life. For 63 years, Scott will never have. The law says children deserve second chances. It doesn't say what the victim's family deserves. What stays with me isn't the video or the sentencing. It's the ordinariness of evil. 4 boys in a stolen car. A bike commute at dawn. A decision made in seconds that destroyed decades. Scott's last morning looked like every other. That's the cruelty. No warning. No chance. No fairness. If this story mattered to you, subscribe to Notorious Crimes. Drop a comment. Do you think Jonathan's sentence was justice or failure? Share this with someone who needs to hear Scott's name, because being forgotten is the second death. Thank you for listening. This story is based on a real case.
Yeah, the bike is mangled, like it's pretty twisted up.
Some scenes and dialogue have been dramatized from court records and investigative reports.
Fortunately, the culprits captured themselves on camera and blasted it on social media a year after the murder of Scott Habermel, because evidently, getting likes and street cred is more important than avoiding jail time.